Hello, 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 and welcome to Couch Chats with Corey and Courtney.
Hello.
I'm Corey,
I'm Courtney.
and today on the show we have our really good friend Moltyn Decadence,
Hey.
aka Ryan Webster. Hello, how are you?
Hello. Thank you for having me. I'm so excited to be
Oh, we're
here.
so excited.
You look stunning on this Thursday morning. Like, how are you doing today?
I'm good. Just a little early morning cross-dressing. Does the body good.
It does. So where are you broadcasting from?
I'm at home in my studio.
Perfect.
Wow.
And this is the home of your Monday night shows that we now are
Where all the magic happens. So, in my efforts to acclimate and adjust to the new drag innovations, I've had to reorganize some things in my apartment. I've invested in some equipment and some draperies. And we just do a lot of production here, everything from green screen work to production work. I do a talk show on Mondays, a makeup competition on Wednesdays, and then I do a dressing room chit chat show on Friday.
Yeah.
That's awesome. So what would you say is like the coolest thing that has sort of came out of this new artistic opportunity that we're all in right now?
I think the way that I've been able to connect with queens from all over the country, it's such a unique moment in drag where everyone from national pageantry to drag race to your local hometown girls are all just at home dancing for dollars on camera.
Right.
And it's a very uniting kind of vibe, which doesn't really happen in drag because it just tends to be a solitary sport just because that's how it works. But when there's so many of us that have to rely on collaborations or projects or just other queens to help make the illusion happen, when you don't have that interconnectivity, you have to really get creative at how you keep that vibe going. And it's been really fun to see how different queens from around the country are doing that, and it's just been beautiful.
Yeah, I mean, that is definitely something that, all of us artists in different ways is sort of dealing with, is that so much of our art comes from the audience interaction, if you will. And now we have the ability, if you're creative like you, to reach thousands of more people than you ever would have had if you were inside of just some local bar. So there's some really kind of cool things that we're, as you said, that we're able to sort of touch base with our other artists in a way that we never had that opportunity before.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So for our listeners slash watchers who may not know you, tell us a little bit about Moltyn Decadence.
So, Moltyn Decadence is a character that I created about 14 years ago that's a fusion of burlesque, comedy, and thrown together with just a sprinkling of theatrics to create a visual sound experience that makes you want to save room for dessert.
Right.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Has Moltyn Decadence always been your alternate reality, or have you had a different version of that before?
There's been a couple of different versions throughout the years. But when I settled into Moltyn Decadence, I really wanted to be able to experience everything. And that particular character really gave me a conduit to do so. From a very early on, I've had a really difficult time at figuring out what my thing is. And every queen tends to have a specific kind of genre they gear to, or a specific kind of look or a vibe. And I've just never been able to do that well. Right. So when I created Moltyn Decadence, I initially was a gender non-binary performer. So I would come out with varying degrees of masculine presentations and make that into what I liked. I think for the first couple of years, because I didn't own a wig, I would find different things to put on my head, whether it was feathers or little fascinators or any kind of strangeness. And it really allowed me to kind of stretch my own imagination when it came to how I define my drag. And in some ways, that's been a hindrance throughout the years because it's been difficult for me to always find a niche in a show. On the other side, I've been able to do anything that you could imagine in drag. I've probably done it at least once, and I couldn't think of a better way for that to be what my thing is. And so that part has been really fun. But throughout the years, I tried I tried to be a comedy queen for a little while. My name was Bubbleisha Champagne after an awkward pageant in Columbus, Ohio, but that didn't last very long. But I started actually as the Lavana Tercel.
Yeah, you did.
And for a lot of reasons, that name or character didn't really stick around for very long. So Moltyn came around probably about year 2 of drag, and it's stuck ever since.
Right. So what would you say the biggest similarity is between Ryan and Moltyn?
Well, it's interesting because some people have a character that's completely separate from their personality and it's different. Moltyn, for me, is an extension of who I am. As Ryan, I've never really been artistically inclined. In my previous man lives, I was always a scientist and a social worker. So Moltyn for me was an outlet for my creative arts. I was always really bad at painting and sketch work. I am a decent musician if I try, but for the most part, just the individual arts that compose drag were things that I gravitated towards, whether that was costume design, makeup, dance, theatrics. And when I discovered that I could do all of those things in drag, it really became an outlet for me to put a lot of different kinds of art mediums onto a stage. So for me, Moltyn is just a tool. I like to think that the person that I am on stage and the person that I am off stage are the same, but the behaviors and actions are obviously different. When the lights come on and it's action time, Moltyn is this sultry songstress.
I mean, look at you.
And Ryan tends to be a little bit more bookish and a little bit more fun, but the personality is the same. The way that I interact with people are the same. And probably 6 or 7 years ago, I stopped trying to alter my voice in drag and things like that, just because I didn't feel like I was being authentic enough to my character.
Right.
And so those kind of things really helped me kind of figure out where the lines are. But really, Moltyn is the Barbie doll that Ryan always wanted, and I get to be that.
Something that you mentioned that I do want our listeners to get an opportunity to hear about is that activism part of your life. So will you tell us a little bit about the nonprofit and the activism work that you have done both as Ryan and
yeah.
Yes.
So I think that for me, always I've wanted to take care of people. And I was always really unsure as to how that was going to happen. So from college on, I wanted to find a career that allowed me to do so. So when I stumbled onto HIV prevention and sexual health work, it really gave me a moment to be involved actively in my community, whether that was doing condom distribution, testing initiatives, or just generalized outreach. But then it also gave me a moment to take a position of leadership in my community where I could take my education and my experiences and then allow myself to do trainings to give people the tools they needed to go back into their own communities, to then empower their friends, their family, their loved ones to take better care of themselves. So I did that, and then creatively, I was able to take the stage presence in that platform that I have and to be able to push those messages as well. And then they started to shift a little bit as funding streams changed. In my first position with Planned Parenthood, I specified and I went to just HIV work. And I did that for about 9 years. And then in about 2016, there was another shift in work where they moved to prevention for positives as a treatment option to help continue to drop the numbers of new HIV infections, which was fantastic. And I'm so excited to see that program and that platform has been working within our communities. But for me, it meant that as a prevention worker, what I was doing was being slowly phased out. So I could either go and get my master's and become a social worker or become a case manager in that aspect. I could get my PhD and go to teach, or I could step back from that role actively and just do more community engagement. And I decided, for a variety of reasons, that it was more beneficial for me to just be involved as a community leader than to be a frontline worker any longer. So at that point, I joined the AIDS Service Foundation as a board member of the Millennial League, and we were able to engage communities, in that 18 to 25 bracket that typically don't get your traditional HIV and sexual health prevention messages, and really put that in a way that was tangible for those folks. And then I did that up until 2018. And at that point, I just wanted to really focus on what I thought were other messages that people needed to go through. I was personally dealing with a lot of other issues, and I wanted to bring some of those to the light. So issues around body positivity, issues around sexual identity and gender identity, and how those can be very different. And I got involved in an organization called Get Woke that was a pivotal instrument in getting people in communities of color engaged around conversations around health, but also within that organization, there was I don't even know that a sub group is the right way, but there was another vein of interest that it was trying to engage disenfranchised transgender people and people that love them, and how they can access resources, job access, and materials around education that looked and sounded like them. And that was a beautiful moment, and I did that for about 2 years as well. And now I find myself excited to see what the future holds, and it has been beautiful.
I want you to be like my mayor or my president. You are
I worked with the mayor last year.
I know you did, which is something I sort of wanted to also bring up. So about a year ago, we all were part of a pretty cool thing where the streetcar was adorned with this beautiful rainbow for Pride Month. And I believe you were the most wonderful keynote speaker of that day. So something that I wanted our listeners to also sort of hear about is a little bit of that story about how you use public transportation and how important that was for a safe riding environment for all kinds of people.
Yeah, for me, I don't like to drive. I am a bad driver. I know that. I've acknowledged that about myself. And I really chose to engage in public transportation just because it allowed me, that safe buffer where I didn't have to necessarily be behind the wheel. But also it gave me a way that I couldn't get either as a clinician or as a community worker to really engage with my community. It's so easy to become isolated in our own neighborhoods, in our own areas, where you see the same folks, you interact with the same friends, and you forget what your average Joe or average Joanne is living through or going through, and seeing what those experiences are. So when I went back to having a mogul job, I started catching the bus again, and I found that there were so many stories and so many people that I was able to either meet or interact with that I might never had a chance to. But right. Because we all caught the bus, there was that unifying piece of our Kansas City experiences that became really important to me to cultivate. So I became a full-time bus driver. And when Ride KC was looking at expanding their rider protections, there were a handful of us that were reached out to as people that are very vocal about riding the bus on how we can make sure that LGBTQIA riders are safe, how they're feeling welcome, how are they received by the generalized public. And for about a good summer, they did interviews and face-to-face narratives, and they put out a series of publications and eventually a Rider Protection Act that made riding the bus not just safe, but inclusive. And then they capped off the cherry on this beautiful project by getting all of us together to not only celebrate the month of Pride, but to announce that, hey, this is what we did for the community as a whole, but we don't care about that. We want to hear your experience. We want to see your stories. Hear leaders from your community talk about how public transportation is a key component to a healthy, improving, and progressive community.
How do you think we've done in the last year? Do you think that we've maintained that? Do you think we've gotten better?
Oh, yeah. Absolutely. I think in Kansas City specifically, we've taken, everyone says Kansas City's taking the initiative, but I really do believe that we've really taken the initiative on making sure that any and everybody, and I mean that very physically, everybody, whether that's queer, straight identifying, allied, persons who are differently abled. Everybody is welcomed and supported on Ride KC programs, and that exists on from the bike to the scooter to the streetcar to the bus. And I think anyone that's had a chance to catch any of the public transportation here knows that, and anyone that hasn't is missing out on an opportunity to engage with the people of Kansas City in a way that is so impactful and meaningful, and you should try it.
Right. Me and my husband, definitely there will be times on like a Saturday that we'll just get on the streetcar and ride it from Union Station down to the River Market and back, and just kind of see what part of humanity we have not got to touch base on in a while. And there's some of the conversations that just take place between one tiny stop and the other. I carry with me, 2 years now down the road. So it's amazing. You also have participated in a Miss Gay Missouri pageant system. And I believe this year you were supposed to have been competing, but because of COVID, that got postponed. So what is your insight on sort of this idea that you have to wait another year or whatever with this package? Or are you just sort of like taking it every step of the way, one step at a time?
Yeah, it's an unusual moment in pageantry. So most pageant national offices have decided that to make sure that promoters have an opportunity to fundraise and that contestants have an opportunity to present their best package, that most national contests have just been postponed a year. Mm-hmm. So Miss Gay America won't be happening until October 2021. So there's a little discongruence about when to host Miss Missouri. And some people are in a camp that we should just have it and allow people to have longer reigns. And then there's another camp that wants to wait just so that Miss Missouri can have the time to get an actual feel of what their year reign is like, especially because we're living in such uncertain times that this reign is going to be different than all of the others for everyone. Right. And I think that right now the generalized consensus is that we're gonna have it in the fall. And then that Miss Missouri is just going to reign for a year and a half. Yeah. Instead of 2. So she'll reign from October to October when they compete in Miss America, and then they'll have their hand down next spring.
Right. Yeah. And we are, Courtney and myself are often attached with the Miss Gay Missouri board as well. So we've had some conversations on our side as well about like, how, are we able to maybe host a pageant? Are we able to host a preliminary? Or that was if they were going to go ahead and like push through. And then obviously right now Vega is still the current Miss Gay Missouri and is, and gets to rule until whatever. So that program has already shifted. There are people who like yourself that were potentially going to be Miss Gay Missouri by this point already. And you now are sort of just sitting on that package. And I don't know if you're not really in that pageant system, if you kind of realize what it's like to be practicing and keeping that package fresh and new and ready, and now to continuously sort of have it on hold, I think has to be kind of a mind fuck, if you will.
Oh, yeah, honey. And for me, it was a little devastating, honestly, when the shelter-in-place practices took effect. Yeah. Because I was laid off from work March 6th. So I've been off a little bit longer than your average person. And at the time, I like to be ready. So I'd already cut all the checks. I'd already gotten all the costumes. So all of the everything for the pageant spent. It's already been taken care of. Right. So when this happened, I'm looking at, several $1,000s in things and practice that are now just sitting, and that was hard. And for me, I was in the studio with my choreographer twice a week on this routine that I rehearsed, and it's just impossible to keep that level of performance up. So when the pageant comes, I will have to reevaluate what I'm doing for talent, just because I don't have a studio to dance in. Yeah. Right. And I live in, just about under 600 square feet. So I can't dance at home.
Yeah.
And there's not a place I can go to do that.
And that was a conversation, sort of what I was saying is people were sort of maybe hollering at the Arts Asylum in some way to see if they could even like come and just keep their routine fresh, if you will. And at some point, Courtney and I had to discuss that and to say, actually, no one can come in, you know, it's, and we sometimes, because we've been lucky enough to be the host of it for 2 years, we've sometimes had to say, we can't ever let our friends and family rehearse there because there's some sort of like maybe hometown advantage or whatever. And then St. Louis sort of took on having their permanent residence, which is also where America is. And that idea of allowing people to come into the actual space and rehearse shifted. But now we don't have that luxury of letting anyone do that. So I miss all the forms of art that the Arts Asylum is not getting to have right now. And the drag community is a very important part of our life and our mission. And so I miss seeing you sweet queens dancing around on my stage from time to time. So if you ever want to come back and rehearse whenever you can, you have a place to come.
Definitely be there.
Sort of transitioning to another thing, and this sort of allows for Courtney to talk too. Can you guys talk a little bit about what it is like to be a drag queen performer in Drag Queen Storytime, and how you maybe adjust the routine that you do for kids, or if you don't adjust it at all? So I'll let Courtney sort of give a quick thing about what Drag Queen Storytime is, and then Moltyn, I would love to hear, because you're actually one of my favorite performances in Drag Queen Storytime.
It's true, one of mine as well. Yeah, I mean, obviously I have a very different, I spend a lot of time with people in drag, and as do my children. So it is not a strange thing for them to see something that is maybe not directly geared towards kids. But I realize that not everybody has our life. Not everyone has their own little 9-year-old drag queen living in their house. We host Drag Queen Storytime, or did previously to the pandemic, at Hamburger Mary's. And I think you performed it was one of our first, right? Maybe last.
I've done a couple now.
Yeah.
I did one at the very beginning and then one a couple of months before.
Yeah, so we don't ever ask anyone to alter their performance. It's what they're comfortable doing. There are a lot of queens who are very nervous about performing for children, because children, unlike adults, do not have filters. And so if they don't like something, they're going to tell you. Or they may leap onto your lap while you're trying to do something. But I think it's great for them to be exposed to any and all forms of art. So, yeah.
Because Moltyn, you did what I would say is a provocative number, if you will, but you did it so tastefully that I don't even think people realized that there was anything at all, you know? So I wanted to sort of just ask you, do you sort of shift your routines based upon the audience that you're gonna have, or do you kind of just have your show and that you put it out there and don't really care what your audience is, you know? How do you approach that?
So for me, it's a little bit of both. So it's a double-edged sword. So in some aspects, when art is in its purest or most entertaining form, the creator doesn't consider their audience. They have designed, conceptualized, put together this piece of work, and they're presenting it for people to watch, enjoy, and have their own opinions about. So that's how I think art should be. But when it comes to children, I think, and I love the kids. So I've been entertaining kids as long as I can remember. I mean, everything from birthday parties to elementary school performances to Boys and Girl Scout jamborees. Like, you name it, I will do it if it's for the kids. I think that it's when I was a youngster, knowing what I know about myself now, I can only imagine what and how magical my life would have been if at 7 years old I'd seen a large man in a dress and costumes and things, like living out his fairy princess fantasies, how that could have changed my perception on what the world could have been for me. Right. So I always like to think that for every parent that's uncomfortable, for every institution that's unsure about my presence around those children, I have to remind them that I was that kid who would have lived for this moment. And if there's just one kid in the audience that's going to see me, hear me, and then be able to develop a new understanding of what life's possibilities could look like and how much magic there can be, then I'm doing the work I'm supposed to do. So in that regard, I will alter some of the more raunchy parts of my drag, but for me, my character is across the board, and so my looks tend to be either very 1960s or 70s housewife or full stripper.
And let me tell you, your burlesque stripper is a good show to see.
So good.
Let me tell you.
So
As long as your breastplate matches, right? Is that just doing such a good.
So for me, I like to think really critically about what I'm performing in front of children. And some of the music content, I like to keep a little bit more adult than some do, because I think that we don't give young people the credit enough to how much they're already exposed to and to what they find entertaining. If I was going in and doing a little girl's 19th birthday party, I'm going to do way different music than I'm doing at an 11-year-old's birthday party, just because they're listening and being exposed to different things. Now, my catalog doesn't include any JoJo Sweetia music. However, if I was going to be entertaining a group full of little girls, you better believe I put on a side ponytail and some scrunchies and give them the fantasy.
Giant bows.
That's just what they do. And so I think that for me, when I'm entertaining children, I always go, what is appropriate for them to see? What are they going to be able to understand? And then what things are going to be conversations they need to have with their parents afterwards? And those are the things that I avoid.
Right.
Because if the question is, ooh, mommy, like, where did she get her lipstick? Or, ooh, what is she wearing? Those things are fine. But, ooh, mommy, what does this word that I don't understand mean? That's where I usually draw the line at.
Sure.
I think in terms of any kind of entertainment, we want to be engaging and open and entertaining for people, but I don't want to necessarily cause a shift in cognitive development at a drag show where all of a sudden there's now this 9-year-old who's going, Mommy, what's that mean? And now you have to go to Urban Dictionary and get resources. I don't want to do that.
It's funny. I will say, as a parent who has kids that are exposed to way too many things, it's a lot easier. I don't remember what question I was asked, but it was something about religion that was like very, very specific. And again, my daughter is overexposed to things because she wants to know about her community, and her work with the sisters requires her to have at least some information because she is at events where they are distributing condoms or whatever that is. So she's a really big fan of Pose. And somehow explaining tucking was a lot easier than like this random like religious question of like, well, it was something like, a girl in her class told her she was gonna go to hell for not going to church, and she didn't understand. I was like, that is a very grand concept. Let's go back to tucking. That was easier somehow for me to explain to you.
Crazy. Well, now I can't believe we're already in our last 10 minutes. I please come back whenever we have a couch to sit on, Moltyn. And
yes, I would love to.
Talk for hours with me. So one of my favorite questions to ask is, what is your definition of real magic?
Oh, real magic is giving people the opportunity to believe in something they couldn't before.
Boom, boom, boom. That's right. Miss Perry?
All right, you are a new addition to the crayon box. What color are you and why?
Ooh, tangerine, because that particular color could be anything. It can be the color of the sky, it can be the color of the ocean, the color of fruit, the color of people. I think that I've always gravitated towards the color tangerine because it has so many possibilities. And of all the colors in the box, it's the only one that you can't go, this is one thing, this is this is that. Tangerine can be anything.
You can. And so can you, Moltyn. So can you. You can be anything you want.
I can!
You can. What is something you were told you could never do or do well that you have accomplished or are in the process of accomplishing?
Ooh. I've been fortunate that I haven't gotten a lot of "you can't do that" messages in my life, which I think has resulted in me being the kind of adult that I am now. I had the most supportive mother in the whole world. And she always told me that anything that I could dream about, if I put work to it, it could become reality. So I think the only thing that I don't do now is that I don't make my own music.
Mm-hmm.
And just because I was in a lawnmower accident as a kid, so my hand was in a hard cast for about a year.
I didn't know that. That's crazy.
Oh
Yeah.
yeah, girl, it was a mess. I got my hand caught in a lawnmower in high school, and
No.
so they had to rebuild a couple of things, cast me, wait for that to heal, break it again, so they could it was a mess.
Oh my God.
We have our part 2 story, everyone.
That's right.
Yeah, and so I played cello and viola in high school, and obviously I lost some of those skills. So that's the one thing that I don't do now. So I guess the message that I got was that I couldn't make music while I was broken, and I really believed that, and so I just stopped, and it's probably the only thing that I regret to this day. But given my current sheltering at home practices, I realized that of all the things that I do, that's the one thing that I haven't been able to check off my box. So I did a couple of cam girl shows, and I bought myself a ukulele.
Yes.
So I will be checking that off the list, hopefully at the end of the summer, and just really just putting out some kind of music. I'm not a very good singer, so that's not something for me. But I think creating music is the most natural way that our bodies create art. And while I'm not been blessed with good vocals, I would still love the opportunity to just do that. I think
You can come and sing at me anytime you want.
yeah. I mean, the body just feels good when people sing. Like there's that Elf movie, singing is the best way to spread cheer, but it really is. Whether you're in the shower, alone in the car, anybody in the world, across the world, regardless of language, knows what that feeling is to just produce guttural throat sounds that make you feel good.
Yes.
And I would love to be able to say that I'm the kind of queen that does that also. So I'm working on that.
All right. I love that.
All right, Ms. Parrott, your last question.
All right. Okay. You're invisible for 24 hours. What do you do with your time?
Oh, 24 hours.
And you can teleport. You can go anywhere
Yeah,
you want.
Oh, there's multiple powers. Oh, okay. So now we're talking. So I would start at the National Library just because there's so many historical texts that I will never be able to just get my hands on and read and touch. And I have such a tactile love of knowledge that being able to just touch and feel some of the oldest texts in our nation's history would be a live dream. Then from that, I would like to teleport, because that's a thing, to just spend a couple of hours at sunset watching the sunset on the pyramids in Giza.
Mm-hmm.
I can't think of a more beautiful experience, and I haven't been able to do that yet. And then if there was any time left between those two, I would want to just go and spend time watching Oprah meditate.
Okay.
As someone who's been one of my biggest inspirations, I always have this almost obsessive wondering at how people that I look up to do self-care.
Yeah.
And just getting to watch her in a non-creepy way, and making sure that, things were appropriate. So I specifically meditating to just watch how she's able to close off all of the amazing things she's been able to do all in her life and then take care of herself. And just getting to watch that, I think, would be the most beautiful moment in history. Like, could you imagine watching Oprah do a silent prayer while having a cup of tea? Oh my God.
I love her.
Yeah.
What is, this is our last sort of 2 questions. So this is your time. So is there anything that you have not had an opportunity to say, anything you want to promote or pimp, or any words of advice you'd like to give our listeners?
I think for my own stuff, you'll see it, you'll hear it, follow me, you'll stay abreast. But
Yeah,
I
tell us
think,
how we can find you. If
you can find me on all of your social medias at Moltyn Decadence, or you can go to my website, moltyndecadence.com. But I think the one message, I think especially right now that's important, is that I've really learned that the most therapeutic thing that anybody can do is to create something beautiful. And whether that's a sketch in your bathroom, whether that's making the perfect sandwich, whatever that is for you. I think our bodies are so naturally inclined to do something that, especially right now, that if we take even just a few minutes of a day to put something from ourselves out into the universe, just imagine how much more beautiful the world could be.
I couldn't have said it better. Well, let's take our selfie really quick.
Okay, all right, hold on, let me get these. I have to remember these keys every week. All right, are you ready?
Let me make sure my teeth aren't showing. Ready.
Perfection.
All right. Well, thank you so much, Moltyn, for being on our show. This will be airing here in probably the next 20 minutes. So we love you, and we can't wait to see you again on the couch and in real life soon.
Oh, yeah, one more thing for
Thank
me,
you for having me, y'all.
Absolutely. Yeah. Thank you for being here.
Oh,
one more thing.
And spoiler alert, I can't wait to film a video for
Digital
Story.
I'm so excited. I'm going to get my video editing skills on point this time during quarantine. If anybody does the prayer, good juju, good feelings out there in the world, Nick Cordero is not having a very good time right now. So just put those good feelings into the world for him. For anybody who doesn't know, he's a Broadway star, but also did his stint in Kansas City at the Rep for.
He thought he was doing so well, and then something happened yesterday.
Let's send him lots of good energy.
Good juju out into the world for him. So that's what I got. All right. Bye, guys.
Bye.